Hey there, friends, and welcome to Montessori 101, a live show from Child of the Redwoods, all about the magic of Montessori. We believe that every child deserves a Montessori education. I'm Aubrey Hargis.
And I'm David Hargis. So, whether you're watching us live or you're watching the replay, or maybe you're listening to the podcast version of this, we're just happy that you are with us. And if you'd like to learn more about the work that we do off of YouTube, you can get us online at childoftheredwoods.com.
Okay, today we are talking about building a homeschool foundation for the upcoming school year.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's still midsummer out there. I know a lot of families are still having summer fun. There are beach trip plans, there are vacations plans, there may be road trips planned. We just finished one ourselves.
We did.
And on my goal list, actually, you probably don't know this, but like on my Q3 goal list for Aubrey's wishes and dreams for the next several months.
Let's see.
Is actually have summer fun. Like that's actually one of my goals.
Summer fun.
Yes, summer vibes. I think it's like feel the summer vibes. And that feels especially relevant here in San Francisco. We just came from hot states on our road trip all the way into the fog. And I walked out this morning, I'm wearing a coat and it's drizzling.
I know it's deadly. I mean, literally deadly heat most places. Yeah. So I hope all of you out there in the South or around the world who are experiencing this unprecedented heat are safe. We are, on the other hand,
cold. I know. So feel the summer vibes. Get out. If your kids enjoy the sprinkler, just like water play. I remember that was something we really loved doing with our kids in the summer.
Well, we just came back from Texas.
Yeah.
Where the kids did have a lot of sprinkler play. Yeah. And it's a real treat because it's too cold here.
I know.
No one plays in the sprinkler.
We took in those summer vibes. We really did.
They can check that off.
It's also, I have run into many people over the last several weeks who have talked to us, and they usually say something like this: oh, well, it's almost, it's kind of the middle of July. Gosh, are your kids starting school soon?
Yeah, right.
And we kind of look at each other and we kind of give a little smirky chuckle because we can start school whenever we want as homeschoolers. We don't really have a clear, okay, kids, like now we are starting school and now we're not, in school anymore. We kind of more have seasons where we're like more in the summer vibe or more in the fall vibe or more in the it's holiday season and and things just kind of shift throughout the year, and it feels very natural to do homeschooling that way. Of course, not everybody does. Nope. But there is something to be said for feeling the energy of school coming up. And
yeah, that's right.
We're definitely feeling it.
Because here in the U.S., at least, it's back to school time. Like you said, we are starting to get those questions. I bet some of you are too. Mm-hmm. When does school start again or whatever? And, we have always followed kind of a 365 approach, especially when the kids were little. Mm-hmm. Now that they're older and they have more classes outside the home, so they're kind of dependent on schedules. But as you said, even if you are taking a more 365, learning doesn't have a start or an end date. There is something about falling into the rhythm. And as back to school sales and the sort of the conversation and the energy and the weather begins to change, it does kind of recall to mind school days. Yeah. And so this is a really common time.
In a positive way.
In a positive way. Yeah. So even if you don't follow a traditional school calendar, like many homeschoolers will not do, it's still kind of in the air. And it's a great time to be thinking about your year ahead. What do you want? Whether it's your first time to homeschool or you're a veteran, what is it that you want your year ahead to look like?
Yes, so this brings us to, so summer vibes was one of my overarching goals for the season, but on my actual to-do list is start the school year strong.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about what that means to me personally. What does it mean to start the school year strong? What do we need to do in order to make it a successful year ahead? Because a lot of the impact of like whether you actually feel like you are successful or not does come from whether you are setting realistic expectations for yourselves
That's
and
right.
whether you're doing the things now, even if it's just mentally, to prepare yourself for that really strong school year.
That's right.
When it comes to late August, early September, when everyone else is in school, and suddenly a lot of us homeschoolers are kind of stricken with like, oh, I should like actually be doing school
Totally.
now, right? So now is actually a great time to start that thought process, start kind of thinking about how you want your school year to look next year
Yep.
and really the things you want to put into place. And so that is what we're really talking about
That's right.
when we use the word foundation. Like, what is it that is going to build your support system for the year so that you don't end the year feeling like I failed, I didn't do anything, right?
Exactly. Because, like it or not, the world we live in today is based around linear measured time. I
Yeah.
mean, if you look through history, if you're a student of history, you can look back and know that that wasn't always the case, but it doesn't matter because today in the 21st century, it is definitely the case. And we all feel that pressure. And so when we choose not to engage with it at all, we can sometimes suffer a sense of regret. And so our advice is to lean into it. Say, like, this is the beginning of school for most people in my community, whether they homeschool or not. And so, what are we going to do to celebrate or to commemorate or prepare for that? And we wanted to have some tips to share with you guys out there as you're thinking through. In fact, we have 4 tips for setting a good foundation for your year ahead.
Yeah, we do. Well, what's the first tip?
Oh, already to the first tip? Well, the first tip is you need a philosophy of education. So, what does that mean? It means you don't need to be a theorist or a scholar. We're not asking you to go back to school and study through it. We are asking you to be intentional. If you are intentional, if you have a set of beliefs about what learning should be and what you want your schooling experience in your home or outside your home to look like, you're going to be in a better position. And this is the number one, and it's really going to dictate the other 3 and basically anything else. You really need to have a philosophy of learning, a philosophy of education. Now,
Mhm.
we are Montessorians, and so Montessori is the work that we follow. Our philosophy of education is centered around it. And so that means things like following the child, right?
Mhm.
So when we think about what should school look like, it should be child centric. It should emphasize project learning, research, creative free time, letting the child tap into their own intrinsic abilities to learn and explore, trusting in them. The things that Maria Montessori wrote and guides us around, right? And when we look at schools, whether it's our homeschool or it's a public school or a private
Mhm.
school, that's how we would measure, like how close to that ideal does the school get, and knowing that there's always compromises. And so for us, like,
Yeah.
why do we homeschool? We homeschool in part because we felt that um, we could most adequately provide that environment at home.
So as you were talking about, I was thinking, like, I just had a flashback of my teaching at school days, and I was just really thinking about how it was super important that as a school we were embodying really the same philosophy of
Totally.
education. And sometimes that was a conflict, because not every teacher believes in the same
No, as you have a
underlying
very
foundation.
diverse set of
Yes,
beliefs
and we
there.
both had issues with that as public school teachers. Being a Montessorian, not everybody in my school was on board with Montessori, and so that made for kind of a disconnect there.
Yep.
So it's really, really important that as a family, it's important as a school too, but it's not always achievable. But it is achievable at home. It's really, really important that you share that foundation, that
Yeah.
approach together.
I mean, why is that? What is it about having a philosophy that's so essential? Because it is, I would say, the most essential. And as is in most things in life, we talk about a purposeful life or an intentional life. It's the same thing, right? Exactly the same. Why is it that makes it so powerful, so vital?
Well, I think that it really helps you to feel centered and confident in that you have a big goal in
Yeah.
mind. So in Montessori, we want, we say this phrase a lot, we want to help each child reach their full potential. What does it mean to reach a full potential? That is kind of up for some debate, but I think that most Montessorians would say it's not the high school diploma. It's not like the completion of third grade or
Yeah.
even a college degree. Like that isn't the measure. For a child to reach their full potential, it gets a little wishy-washy,
Yeah.
right? It has to do with like what the spirit of the child is being called towards, what they seem to be motivated to want to learn. And so our job is then to guide them and help them flourish that part of themselves that is so curious about that thing, whatever that thing is.
Hmm.
So Montessori, in a sense, it's kind of our philosophy of education is hard to explain to others who may be really immersed in a more of a
Yeah.
um,
Classical education or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, or skill. I was going to say like
Skill
a
based.
skills based mastery
Mm.
checklist type of approach to education. But that doesn't mean that we don't have some very clear guidelines for
Yeah,
ourselves.
because yeah, right. To say that we have a philosophy or that you should have a philosophy doesn't mean that you need to be a purist. What you need is a philosophy that is right for you and your family. So
Mhm.
we are for sure Montessorians, but we also do a lot of non-Montessori stuff, in part because we do it at home, and in part because we're not purist Montessorians, part because of the reality of, as our children age and grow and what seems to work for them or not, what resources are available. So you'll find unschooling concepts in our work. You'll find game schooling, project-based learning. You'll
Mhm.
even find some elements of that kind of skill-based classical education when it's appropriate. So it's not to say, don't get confused when we say you need a philosophy. It doesn't mean you have to be rock ribbed rigid to it. What you need is a sense of like a vision. There's a top, there's a mountain, then you can see the top of it, and you're trying to climb toward that top. Whether that top is purely defined by one philosopher or another, or work set of works or another, isn't important. In fact, I would say you shouldn't try to do this; it's just unrealistic. But you really do need to have a philosophy because the consequences of not having it are kind of big.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I even unschooling, when we think of unschooling as being like the
A
opposite of
total
curriculum and
laissez
like,
faire.
right. But it actually is a very, very clear philosophy of education.
Yeah,
If
that's
you've
right.
ever met any unschoolers, we have a whole episode all about Montessori plus unschooling. So if you're interested in
Yeah, I
that,
did that a few
definitely
weeks ago.
go check
Yeah.
that out. But I find that the parents who really come to us or that I meet at Park Day who don't have a clear philosophy of education, they often come across as kind of uncertain and kind of floundering, feeling like the answer lies in the curriculum itself. And so they tend to ask more questions about, like, well, what are you doing for math this year?
Mm.
Rather than like, what is your child learning? Or, what are you teaching them for math? Or what
Mhm.
resources are you using? It's I think that you can get caught up in the idea that some little workbook or something will solve your problem,
Yeah.
where if you just like stick to the schedule, make your kid answer these problems, then you will have accomplished homeschooling, so you can really get caught in that kind of trap. But what our children really need from us is confidence in this approach for learning. We don't have to tell them that it's forever.
No.
Maybe you don't plan on homeschooling forever. That is okay. But you need to be able to clearly articulate why you are choosing this particular lifestyle.
That's
And that
right.
also includes, conversations about the way you are teaching your children or the way you are choosing to guide them. And so I would go so far as to say that there are consequences if your children don't understand
Yeah.
the philosophy of
Absolutely. Yeah,
education.
the fish rots from the head, as they say, right? So if you don't have clarity of mind, it's going to cascade down, right? So
Is that what they say?
it is. That's the old saying.
Okay.
Well, that's an old saying where I come from. Fish town,
Never heard that one.
you know? Um, no, you've got to have a clarity of purpose, or your own sort of anxieties and uncertainties are going to, well, they're going to affect, or they're going to influence the child's own appreciation. It also is important because one of the questions we get asked a lot is, how do I get my husband, my wife, whatever, depending, my partner, my mother-in-law, whomever it is, to buy into this. Like, I want to homeschool, or I want to do Montessori homeschooling, and how do I get them along? And if you don't have a really, a pretty clear idea why that philosophy, like the why of the homeschooling experience, it's hard to articulate it. If you don't believe in something, or you can't articulate that belief to yourself, it's very, very difficult to articulate that to others. And that can come across as sort of wishy-washy, and that can feel defeating. So you may have a deep, like, it's the right thing, but if you don't have a way to articulate that, it gets harder. And so when you find a philosophy of education like unschooling, or for us, Montessori, then you can sort of point to that. It becomes a shorthand that says, this is the thing that I believe, and this is what I'm trying to create. And the reason I'm homeschooling is I think that we can do it like that the best, or it naturally lends itself to homeschooling, like an unschooling approach, right? Naturally lends itself to homeschooling. So that will really help you as you have those conversations out in the world. If you're in a position to need to sort of build that, because we're saying it's vital, like, what do you recommend? I mean, go out and you definitely can't go buy. I mean, I guess you could go back to college. You could get a degree in education, or you could, I don't know, read every book in the world, but it feels overwhelming, right?
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming. I think you really need to just like choose something and explore that first and see how it feels,
Yeah,
see if it's
right.
aligned with your family.
Yeah, and if it doesn't quite fit, then you would try something else. So, there are lots of programs out there. We obviously offer programs specifically about Montessori. We have two programs called the Foundations. The one is about for parents who have 2 to 5 year olds, it's primary, and then one for parents who have or caregivers who have 6 to 9 year olds. Because we have, sometimes grandparents will take the courses or things like that, and they're just meant to teach you the basics of what is Montessori and how does it work in a home setting, with a real emphasis on the how to and the philosophy, because we believe really strongly. I mean, that's kind of an essential principle of why we started Child of the Redwoods, is that we really believe you need a philosophy of learning or education, and you can do it. We believe everyone has the capacity to teach, but it's much, much harder if you don't have sort of a focus. If you don't know where the top of the mountain is, your journey is much, much harder.
Agreed.
Okay, so philosophy of education. Now, number two.
Number two?
Yes, are you ready to move on?
It's totally
I'm
to
ready to
you.
move forward.
Okay.
So you need a philosophy of education. And then the second thing, and you hinted at that, is you need curriculum and lessons to match. And you mentioned this earlier, like sometimes people will start the other way around. They'll go buy a bunch of books or programs or apps or something, and then they'll be disappointed when it doesn't satisfy, it doesn't cohese. But it's the other direction, right? You have to start with the philosophy, like, this is what I believe education
Mhm.
should be, and then I'm going to find the resources that make that possible.
That's right.
So, how do you go about doing that? Like, in terms of knowing what to find or not to find?
Well, we're actually about to do this in our
That's
constellation
true.
annual planning party, but what I usually recommend parents do is to really think about what their personal values are, what they really want out of their child's education, big picture wise, and then to do some research about different philosophies of education that match that. And for us, there are like it's not just Montessori. There are
Hmm.
several, and you already mentioned like we're really kind of drawn to Waldorf as well. I'm drawn to it because of the old world nostalgia craftiness of it. We're
Yep.
drawn to unschooling. We live in a very unschool friendly area.
Yep. Here on the West
Yeah,
Coast.
and so I know a lot of unschoolers who are very solid in their approach to unschooling, and so that influences us as well as a community. And also, there's a lot of good crossover there.
Yep. Totally.
So I think that is probably the space to start. What do you really believe about education? Why are you homeschooling?
Yeah. Yeah. Most of us homeschoolers have pretty limited resources in terms of financial resources. I mean, some people can buy whatever they want, but most of us are on a budget of some type.
That is
And
true.
so just willy-nilly picking stuff can be very expensive. And regardless of your financial situation, you definitely have limited time as a parent.
I have noticed that families who have unlimited funds tend to just hire a teacher.
That's true. So I
That
guess
is
that solves the money and the time problem.
that that is what I have noticed.
Although I think we've
Um,
discussed before whether that's homeschooling or something like private
it's
tutoring
still
over the
considered
years.
homeschooling in the state of
Right.
California.
It is.
But I think for your mainstream homeschooler, you are hunting for good deals, you're looking for curriculum, you're looking for resources, and you're getting recommendations from friends as well.
Yeah. So this kind of leads to the sense of consequences, right? Because why is it important to find that curriculum and lessons to match? Part of it is money. You're going to waste a lot of money if you just go grab stuff. If you start with the premise of, for example, we have the premise that we want project based, we want research heavy, we want creative focused. We're not going to look for programs that are lots and lots of worksheets. It's just like maybe in the right circumstances. And we found that for certain areas or certain concepts, we found better luck with a more direct classical approach. But by and large, our default is to look for materials that support a more open, project based, creative centered, child led experience. And so we can immediately start to sort things like we don't need these things. These aren't going to work for us, or they're not going to work for us for these things. It would only maybe work for this particular scenario. And that's because it's starting from the philosophy of education, right? It also is about time. How much time do you have? So if you are all the time that we spend searching for resources, uh, finding them, learning them, introducing them to the kids, oh boy, you talk about a lot of time involved. So there's a practical, literal, material consequence to not starting with a philosophy and then matching materials to that philosophy. But I think more than that, it's just hard on the kids.
Yeah, if their parents don't really seem to be centered, for sure.
Yeah, right. So, how do you know if you're buying stuff that's going to match?
That's going to match your philosophy of
Yeah.
education. You have to preview it first.
You heard it here, folks. Reading.
Yeah, I also think that it helps to know the people who are writing the curriculum. And
Yeah.
those of you who have been here a long time know that I feel very fervent about this. Is a lot of curriculum out there written for homeschoolers. Um, and a lot of it is just republished curriculum
We're seeing a lot of that
that
now.
was written for other uses.
Yeah.
And you even see it in the Montessori community. You see resources that were created for teachers, for maybe professional development or for training. And then like maybe those resources are pared down a whole lot. A lot of it is like cut
Maybe.
out, and then they just repackage it and sell it to homeschoolers.
Yeah, especially during
Um,
the pandemic when people were teaching at home more, they were sort of in a position where they needed to homeschool in some way.
yeah.
And these companies are like, oh, there's an opportunity here. So it's a bit of, there's not really, we don't have a lot, hold those in high regard. I mean, some of that material can be very good, but it's not for homeschoolers and it can really mislead and not serve your best purposes, right? Because it's not designed with homeschooling in mind. Maybe it's good, maybe they're great resources for a classroom, but this isn't a classroom environment. You have to modify. It's one of the things we learned very early on. We're both trained educators, we were both classroom teachers, and when we started homeschooling, we're like, oh, you know what, we got this all sussed out, right? We figured it out. But you learn really quickly, like, actually, these things work, but these things, no way. Don't do it that way. Like that was designed for a class of 30 kids or something. And so it's very freeing, but you need to find materials that are going to be authentic or matched to an authentic homeschooling environment.
So to answer your question, the thing that I really look for is whether the curriculum is written or published by a person whose philosophy of education matches the philosophy of education that I am using. And
Yeah.
so if I were going to choose math resources, I look to see, what's the author's background? Do they have a background in Montessori? If they do that, that would be cool. Or do they have an interest in Montessori? And sometimes you can tell by
Yeah.
blog posts that they write or on their about page. Do they really seem to share the same kind of values that I have about my kids' education?
This is actually why we started publishing curriculum, because we originally only focused on the teaching the foundationals, but now we, just found this little booklet on our thing. This is this comes from a 4-part card activity. This is the little control book that you can make for it. It's on a volcano, and it is a part of our constellation curriculum, which we created because we wanted to provide materials, DIY and print at home materials for parents who are trying to do Montessori at home. So matching the sort of the philosophy to the materials, and then finding a source that can provide that. All right. So you need a philosophy, and you need to buy some number of materials. We would say few. You really don't need a lot. Don't go out and buy a bunch of stuff. Right? So buy a little bit that you need to support your philosophy and support your child's learning. And then what's number 3?
Number 3 would be to focus on your rhythm and routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. You got to have a it's like a quiz. Let's say I'm going to grade you on that one. No, that's right. Yeah, you need to have a rhythm and routine. You need to have a sense of your time, your calendar. And you need to have an objective in mind, but a big picture objective, right? Where do you want, this goes back to the top of the mountain thing. Like, what do you want to accomplish at the end of this week, at the end of this month, at the end of this semester, however you're accounting your time? And you need to list that out, to be really, really, really clear. I think it's important. Do not overschedule your kids. So we're saying create a schedule, a daily, weekly, monthly schedule, have a big picture objective in mind. Do not overschedule them. Kids need a lot of free time. They need time to think. They need time to explore the stuff that you're introducing. They need time to get bored and learn how to entertain themselves. And when we don't provide those opportunities for kids, we're really depriving them. This is bad news for kids when they are overscheduled. So don't confuse the idea of scheduling with overscheduling. But you do want some kind of a schedule, because we kind of go a little. It's easy to kind of get lost when we don't have a map. Is that right?
Well, in our primary course, we talk a lot about schedules. Homeschoolers tend to at first overschedule themselves. You might look online and you'll see schedules that are like wake up at 7:00, 7:30 breakfast, 8:00, read aloud time, 8:15, this, it just like goes on for like every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes throughout the day. And in Montessori, we do believe that children do need a very regular routine. And we talk also about how what we're really doing is creating space for our children to learn. And so where does that space happen? So one of the concepts we talk about is the work cycle.
Yeah.
And we talk about how to find that work cycle and how to figure out what works for your family.
The work cycle is one of those essential Montessori concepts.
It is.
Yeah. So if your philosophy of education is Montessori, then you really need to understand the work cycle.
I think so.
Yeah. And the other thing about the reason I was thinking this is one of the 4 essentials is that while we don't want to have I don't think that the sort of micro standards approach to learning that we see today is healthy. It is also important to have a sense of direction. Like, we do want to set expectations for ourselves and for our children on learning progress, and those should be derived from what science and research and education research tells us is appropriate for the child. And again, this was where Montessori would come in handy, right? Because it can teach us sort of the developmental flow of a child and periods of readiness and sensitive periods and so forth. Again, another reason why we have chosen Montessori. But you want to have, with those in mind, you still want to set a sense of some expectation. So that expectation could be that you're going to practice math every day.
Mhm.
It could be that you're going to read books every day. It could be that you're going to go visit grandma every week. It could be that you're going to have a park day or some kind of a field trip day with friends on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it's a variety of kind of more traditional academic and and maybe I don't want to say non-academic because I think actually all those things are learning experiences, but they're not of the kind of classically defined academic, right? They're more social, emotional, or they're part of the whole learning experience more broadly. And when we write that stuff down, it can help us kind of track along to how we're doing. And the consequences of not doing this are you can really feel like you're just going nowhere. You're spinning your wheels.
Yep. Well, it's true. And so that is a reason why in our foundation courses, we put a huge amount of emphasis on that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Tip number 4.
Okay. Tip number 4. So tip number 4 is you need a support group. So teaching, in our experience, is a pretty lonely profession. You spend a lot of time with kids, with young people who are not mature and have a lot of emotional and intellectual demands, and it is tiring. And you're in a room all day with them alone, and you're like, did I do something right or wrong? Or maybe I should have introduced this lesson, or maybe I didn't handle this disciplinary issue correctly or not. The fact is that homeschooling isn't any different. It's still a very lonely experience by and large because you're there, you're alone, you have the role as the dad or the mom or whatever your role is in that situation, but you are also taking on the responsibility of educating the child. And it is hard to feel confident all the time. We're just social creatures. Humans are meant to work together. And so the solution to this is finding a support group.
There are a lot of different kinds of support groups for people.
That's right.
So, one of my go-tos is obviously the local community that's around us, especially when the children were little. It was like we knew that our kids were at the park while everyone else's kids were at school. And so it just was the perfect time to express uncertainty or worries to each other and then to allow each other to bolster each other up. And
Yeah,
what I found is that actually happens online as well. It
definitely.
can, especially for families that they don't have a 100% super solid local community of homeschoolers like around them.
Or maybe that community doesn't reflect their philosophy,
Mhm.
right? Maybe they are in a community where, let's say you're not an unschooler, but you lived here, where a lot of people are unschooling oriented, but you want to still provide that sort of support for yourself and for your kids. Having that philosophy can really help. And then you could blend sort of the live with the online, where you can find maybe a group that's more aligned with your teaching approach.
That's right. All right. Let's give a recap. What are those 4 points again?
Well, the number one is you need a philosophy of learning. What is it that you want your schooling? What is it that learning should look like? And finding somebody, a guru, a mentor, something, a research philosophy that reflects that. And then learning enough about that, maybe with the aid of an online program like ours, that you can articulate it to yourself and to others. Number two, got to have a curriculum that matches. So
Mhm.
you have your philosophy, go out and find just the resources you need to
Mhm.
make that a thing. And don't start the other way around. That is the biggest mistake we see people make. They buy a lot of stuff and then it doesn't match, right? It's just a mishmash of stuff. So you start with the philosophy. Now you're going to find the curriculum, and you're going to want to look for curriculum that is developed, or materials, lessons, books, whatever, that is developed by people or organizations that are reflective of your philosophy
Mhm.
and have a genuine understanding. And it's not just shoehorned in there.
Mhm.
Number three, you want to make a schedule and keep that schedule so that you can see those wins along the way and have a sense. It's also going to help you with observing the child. Aubrey, you were talking about the 3-period lesson. And it's also going to help you sort of see how you're progressing to those big outcomes, the thing that you really want for your child. Like, for example, I want my sons to have more time with their family, their extended family in the semester ahead. I want them to read a certain number of books, and I want them to have an appreciation of, let's say, American government, something like that. So I have these big picture goals in mind, and this will help me know whether I'm kind of moving toward it. And it's really, really vital to the kids. Involve them in this process.
Mhm.
And then the last one is don't go it alone. You need
Mhm.
a support group. There are lots of them out there. We have, of course, a community that's a part of our program. So if you joined either Constellation or one of our foundations programs, you would be part of that community, and you would also get coaching from Aubrey. So it's great. You get this kind of guru approach or this mentor approach. I don't know what's the right word there.
Mentor approaches.
Mentor approach. I don't know. You're like the guru of Montessori. So humble. So so you need that stuff. You need, however you find it, wherever you find it, you need a philosophy, you need matched materials to it, you need a schedule, and you need to have a support group.
Yes. We're going to wrap it up here. But just so you guys know, we do have foundation programs at Child of the Redwoods.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah, say it ain't so. We've got our primary program for ages pre-K, well, toddler through kindergarten.
Yep.
So toddler, pre-K, and kindergarten. And then we've got our lower elementary program for first through third grade.
Yep.
And the start dates of the coaching sessions are starting soon.
So in about a month. Yeah. So we're enrolling people now so that they're all ready for the coaching to begin in August. And as you join now, you get into the community, start to meet folks who are already taking the course, who've already signed up, or who are alumni and still in the community, and kind of get your feet wet and start to get that planning piece done.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So the other thing to mention is we are going to be at the California Homeschool Conference in San Jose, California next week. We'll be live here, but then later in the week, we'll be there. So if you're coming, please stop by, say hi. We're going to have a little booth there. We have some fun sessions coming up there as well. If you are in California or near Northern California and you want to head over, it's a really great event. It's really, really great for kids too. So bring everybody and have a lot of fun there. If you can't make it there and you still want to say hey, you can reach us online at childoftheredwoods.com. You can email us at hello@childoftheredwoods.com. We have also Instagram and other things. You could just leave a comment here on this video.
That's right. We're going to be back next week, friends. It feels so good to be back with these lives. We're going to be talking about our essentials series again. I know a lot of people are excited for us to wrap up those 21 essentials. And this time we are talking about books. We're going to do a session on reading. So nonfiction books are essential, and we'll tell you why they are really important in Montessori. All right. So we'll see you then at 1 o'clock on Tuesday.
Stay cool out there, everybody.